Hey everybody, this is Mary and Cowie Owen.
And this is David Owen.
And this is You Show Me Yours, the podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and TV that they loved before the first date. And today, I was made to watch Dracula.
Yes, Dracula. Yeah, I'm not going to do that for the whole thing, I promise you.
I don't think you can.
Dracula, 1931, because it's the lightning crash. Muha, it's a spooktacular. Yeah, it's the second annual Spooktacular, and we're here to watch a bunch of Dracula movies. There are a lot of Dracula movies, and I debated over which ones to show Marion. I kind of made the rule that I need to have seen them or be pretty sure that I've watched them, and there's only one on this list where I'm kind of just like, I watched that one time, right? So we are introducing her to classic Dracula movies, specifically Dracula, as in retellings of the Bram Stoker novel.
Yeah. As Dave has reminded me, not all vampires are Dracula.
Yes, all Draculas are vampires. Not all vampires are Draculas. Yeah. So there could have been an argument maybe to start with Nosferatu, which is an unauthorized German silent film where things are changed. He's not Dracula; he's Count Orloff. But the story beats are all the same.
Wait, Orloff, isn't that a character in like Lemony Snicket?
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just seeing some tentacles of connections. Anyway, okay.
I don't know. But instead of that, I went with just straight OG Dracula, Bela Lugosi in his career-defining performance. If you know Bela Lugosi from anything, it's probably from this.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you anything else he has done.
He's actually was in a lot of stuff. I mean, this movie totally pigeonholed him. Mm-hmm. If you've ever watched Ed Wood, which is the movie about the director Ed Wood, Ed Wood stumbled upon Bela Lugosi late in his life and brought him back to sort of be someone of name value for his super low budget movies. But no, he went on from this. So he was already acting before. He's Hungarian, I think. The story that I heard him tell in an old interview was the way he got into acting was he was kind of starting to already be an actor in his home country, and but the way he got to America and really launched his acting career is that he found himself on the wrong side of a revolution. That basically he was a leftist, and as the country went through a revolution, the leftists were scapegoated or whatever, and basically he had to flee the country and came to Hollywood, and the rest is history, I guess.
And I was thinking, does that solidify him being Hungarian, but a revolution in an Eastern European country? That
I'm not exact. Don't quote me on Hungarian, Bulgarian, Romanian. I don't know for sure. Unfortunately, I didn't do a whole crap ton of research for this. But yeah, he was acting before. He was playing he always saw himself as a leading man, apparently. So he was playing like some leading manish roles, but also a lot of villains in these, early silent movies. And it didn't really matter that he was from a foreign country. Like he would teach himself for plays and stuff, like just phonetically. Mm-hmm. He would have someone like read him the lines, and he would just learn how to say the lines. Mm-hmm. And within a few years of doing that, he learned English. But yeah, just like a really interesting story.
Yeah, that is.
And he was in a lot of stuff after this. Famously turned down Frankenstein right after this. So this was this launched Universal's monsters that they would spend the next several years, decade, making sequels to what we now consider to be like the horror standards: Dracula, Wolfman, Frankenstein, Mummy, and others. And he turned down. He was set to be Frankenstein. He turned it down once he kind of figured out it was a lot of makeup time and the monster was mute. So although he's amazing at like looking into the camera, so you'd think you could pull off a mute performance, but also his lines are some of what make Dracula what it is. So
yeah, well, yeah. And Frankenstein being mute. Well, I haven't seen the original, but not a lot of facial expressions, if I recall.
Not a lot. But then, of course, Boris Karloff got that role and went on to become huge. Karloff is another one of those guys where most people would say, oh yeah, he's in Frankenstein. He was in a ton of movies. And just a very like prolific guy in the 30s and 40s. And they were in a movie together, I believe. Black Cat, I believe is the name of it. Don't quote me on that. But at one point they were in a movie together, which was kind of like a big deal. You know, neither they weren't playing Dracula or Frankenstein, but they were in a movie together and like shared the screen. So yeah, Lugosi has this crazy career, and he was a big spender apparently. So he was always broke. So Universal was always like shortchanging him. Like the story about the movie that Karloff and Lugosi were both in was basically that Karloff made like twice as much. Not only at the time was he a bigger star, but they knew Lugosi like just was broke, so they could pay him whatever they wanted to pay him, you know. So they would just offer him, you know, crap, and he'd have to take it. Yeah. But so this is the movie that made his career and made him a household name to whatever extent he's at least a household name for our generation. I don't know about millennials and beyond. But yeah, this is a 1931 ass movie. Old. And
Extremely.
Feels old.
Yeah, you can tell that they had not quite figured out things like sound design.
Well, famously, this movie has almost no music.
Yeah.
And it's very awkward. We're in the transition here in 1931 between silent movies and talkies, and no one had figured this out yet. Like with a silent movie, there was always like a pianist in the theater that was going to accompany the movie, and they had their cues and everything. And so there was music all the time, and no one thought about, oh, well, we're going to need like music. And, you know, this movie's, of course it's super old, and I don't know we streamed it, and I don't know what the transfer is, where, you know, what the source is for this, but you know, it's so quiet, and it's just got that constant, like record sound of like, just in the background all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is rough. It's a really rough watch. And you know, that's kind of like a couple of my points on this movie are kind of that like, it's a pretty rough watch. Before we get into that, if you've never watched Dracula or read the book or watched any of the Dracula related movies, the basic plot of Dracula is that this Transylvanian count, or Romanian, I think, depending on the source material, he's buying a London home, and a couple of people. This movie changes some things up, but a couple of different people are sent to negotiate and secure the sale of this house to Count Dracula, and he then travels to London, where he sort of rubs elbows with some of the wealthy elite, including a doctor who runs a sanitarium, and his daughter, who I believe in the book is named Lucy, but in this movie is named Mina. Lucy in the book has a friend named Mina.
Interesting.
All of the Mina plot points of the book happen to Lucy in this movie, and all of the Lucy plot points happen to Mina.
Interesting.
As I understand it.
Okay.
I've never read the book, but as I understand it, that's how it shakes out. Hey, sorry for the interruption. This is editing David here. Just wanted to break in and say I was confused on this. Actually, the Lucy and Mina roles are going to be switched in the 1979 version of Dracula we're going to watch in a couple weeks, not in this one. So for the rest of this episode, when I say Lucy and Mina are switched or I imply it, just forget about it. I was confused. All right, back to the episode. So it's then from there, it's just sort of a tale of the Mina, in this case, being slowly corrupted by Dracula, and another vaguely European doctor / scientist named Van Helsing, who is sort of figuring out what's happening and what Dracula is. And they're already, they're throwing around words like Nosferatu and vampire, which I believe all come from the book. But, so it's kind of interesting to see that stuff already that developed that early on. And Van Helsing makes an attempt to sort of save Mina. And ultimately in this, it succeeds. I don't know. We'll find out in weeks to come as we watch things that are progressively more accurate to the book. And we'll find out if the very odd and abrupt ending of this movie is actually the way the book ends or not.
It was extremely, like you have the saved Mina and Harker leaving the dungeon, and Van Helsing has just dispatched with Dracula. We assume, we don't really see it.
It happens off screen, and that was censorship stuff.
Well, I figured, and I wonder, is that why they changed the ending? Because I think there were a lot of books at the time where you couldn't I remember they changed the ending of Rebecca because you couldn't let people get away with murder. Mm-hmm. So in Rebecca,
so this is pre-code. Pre-code.
Okay.
So there were, the censorship stuff was more from the studio, as opposed to from the code. But this movie, along with Frankenstein, would be instrumental in, the quote unquote code in Hollywood that would end up with things like that you can't show people getting away with murder, that you can't.
Well, but to get to the abrupt ending, Van Helsing says, "Oh, I'll be right behind you."
Right.
And you think it's going to be like, oh, Dracula's not really dead and he's got but nothing, just the end.
Yeah. And it was supposed to be. There was supposed to be one more scuffle between Van Helsing and Dracula. Okay. So, that's the reason that it ends like that. They either didn't shoot it or didn't like it or whatever. But he literally just says to Jonathan Harker, who is Mina's fiance, you got to get her out of here. And they're like, "Oh, you coming with us?" He's like, No, not immediately or something. And then they just walk out, and then it just says the end. Yeah, it just says the end, and in the corner it says, "It's a Universal picture." Ta-da! Like they're just throwing their own hands up, like that's just how they end.
It kind of seemed like an SNL skit, that ending.
Almost,
right there. So, I'm glad that there was intended to be some like final thing, because it's just so weird. Yeah. With there not being anything.
Yeah. Apparently the director, Todd Browning, who was a known name at the time, he had directed a lot of short films and would go on to continue directing stuff, even other stuff that Lugosi was in later on. Yeah. Apparently had a lot of conflict with the studio. And I think there's another director credited on this because like he did that, like they did that much meddling and stuff, or it might be editor. I don't know. But yeah, so a lot of it is not the intended vision of the director necessarily. What
is funny is, and maybe it's not funny, it's just intentional, but there was, from the point that Mina is, turned on, it's basically Fright Night.
Yeah. Well, or Fright Night is basically it. Yeah. So. A lot of the story beats of Fright Night. Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think that's homage as much as anything. Yeah. That makes sense. Moving that into a modern setting, is a way to get people to, enjoy it.
Yeah. Also, Fright Night, mentioning, I was so in the original Fright Night, not the remake. The kid is watching what's his name, Peter's old movies. Yeah. And there's this point when he's got to run across the room, but it's very clearly beat, run, beat, Yeah. The pacing is all off. This reminded me a lot of that. So again, was that homage or was that?
Yeah. But, and it's hard to tell with this because like we said, it's super early in filmmaking. They were not as if there weren't a lot of silent movies, and good silent movies, there are movies that I know of that are from the 1920s that I enjoy, but this is also kind of, it's fighting uphill. It's running uphill. Because
you're like 2 months late on that joke, but okay.
Yeah. Well, it'll be even later once it's posted. Yeah. Because this is a stage to screen kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the reason that Nosferatu was not a Dracula movie is because the Van Helsing, the Bram Stoker estate did not want to give them the rights to make the movie, and but some plays and stuff, I guess, were able to get the rights. Universal did eventually get the rights, but apparently they also had to buy the rights to like several plays too. like to get everything. They needed to like get all the different parts. And Lugosi was starring as Dracula in the stage version that this is largely adapted from. But even with him starring, Universal had almost no interest in him initially. Like he had to really fight to get the part.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, especially the second half of it, the last like 2/3, really suffers from being staged like a play. It all takes place in like basically like the drawing room of a house with occasional moves here and there. A house which is also, by the way, a sanitarium, which is great.
Yeah,
that also just people just get out and walk around the house.
Right. And it's not even like it's connected by, but three locked doors in between or whatever. Like you can just wander around.
Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah, so it really suffers from that. The first half of the movie is pretty dynamic. Like it's got the great stuff in the beginning with the wagon, the stagecoach, and all that stuff, and the sets are really impressive in the castle. Lots of big, expansive rooms, lots of stuff like that. It's really like it's very interesting and dynamic when Renfield, who we haven't really talked about, is in Transylvania. More differences that I know of from the book. Renfield goes to Transylvania in the book to negotiate, but is basically what happens to Renfield in this movie happens to Renfield in the book. But after that, Jonathan comes.
Oh.
Jonathan Harker comes to negotiate the sale.
Okay.
So they combine the Renfield and Jonathan story into one.
Interesting. Okay.
And then Jonathan, I believe he goes back to London to finalize the sale, and the Count comes over with Renfield in a ship on his own after that.
Okay.
And so when he's in the castle with Renfield, that's all. The sets are great. They have some of the best lines of the movie. Children of the night. All that stuff.
I do not drink wine.
Yes, I never drink wine. Yeah. So yeah, some of the best stuff, and some of the best goofs for like Dracula. When he sees that he cuts his finger, Renfield cuts his finger, Dracula sees, and he's like from across the room, he's and then the crucifix falls out of Renfield's shirt, and so all of this, the great stuff that happens, and then it's just like a play. It's one set, one room.
Yeah.
They're outside on a terrace attached to it a few times. They're in the streets a few times. They're at the theater once, but like this
really stagey bat puppet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's so early and it's so hard to watch because we were both laughing at so much of the stuff
that was not meant to be funny.
This movie, like legit in the 30s, like it redefined horror. Like people were scared of this movie. They were freaked out. Like, especially like the manic way that Renfield, Dwight Fry, the actor that plays Renfield, he has some great stuff. Rats. Like he just has some amazing lines and some amazing faces. Like this is a movie about faces. Like between Renfield and between Dracula, it's just a lot of people copping fake crazy faces directly into the camera. Like 60% of Bela Lugosi's acting is just stone-faced,
with one eyebrow raised,
a spotlight on his eyes, like a highlight light on his eyes, with one eyebrow slightly raised, and just looking into the camera.
It's it feels like an SNL skit. Did I say that earlier?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like this feels like a parody because so many things have parodied it. When I announced this on the Twitter, someone, a friend of mine, brought up, why are we not doing Dead and Loving It, which is a spoof with Leslie Nielsen.
Okay.
And like that's the thing. So much of what they're spoofing, it's like Young Frankenstein. Like when you watch Young Frankenstein, if you haven't seen Frankenstein from 31, like like it's funny, but you don't get it. You don't get how how careful they're being about the spoofing and how much like love they're putting into spoofing it. But yeah, like this movie set the stage for all of the stuff that became spoofing. You know, all of like we talked in the intro or in our little ad thing for the Spooktacular, you talk about the Count. And like, I say the Count is not a Dracula, but like he's clearly based on Dracula. And that is like when we watched Near Dark or when we watched Fright Night, when I talk about breaking down what I thought a vampire could be, this movie is what is establishing what I thought a vampire could be. So, you know, when it all seems so spoofy, it's because you're watching the original material that they spoofed. But yeah, the bat puppet is crazy. It really is just like a rubber bat, and they just move it up and down so that the wings kind of flop around. You know, it's oh, what's that on the yard? It's some sort of dog creature, and you never see it. You just see someone pointing in a direction through a window,
and all the biting, all the deaths happen off screen.
Yes,
you just see Lugosi leaning in. Not even open. You don't see. I don't think we ever saw fangs.
No fangs. Yeah, that was one of the things that Lugosi refused was fangs. Yeah, no fangs. And I believe there's another actor that didn't want fangs in this. It might have been Langella in Dracula 1979. That's also in the Spooktacular. But yeah, he has no fangs. They do note like there are two puncture wounds. Yeah. So you know,
it could well be just there's a fork.
Yeah. You know. Like the setup for the fangs are there, but he never has the fangs, but he doesn't need them. Like there are a few times where he kind of like comes towards the camera with his mouth kind of open. But yeah. And there's sometimes where it's cut because it's that studio meddling type stuff. Like, there was a story that the studio wanted the vampire brides to take Renfield, that they didn't want, that Dracula needed to be like macho. Like he wouldn't bite a man.
Well, okay, yeah, because we were watching the trailer before this showing it to our kid. Like, this is what we're going to watch tonight. Haha.
Yeah.
And it says something about, when a young girl suffers a fate worse than death. And I was like, I think that's a metaphor. Wink. But yeah, but again, that's pretty much a given at this point, that being bitten by a vampire stands in for sex. Was it at this point too?
Certainly at this point. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure at the time that Bram Stoker wrote it, it was about corrupting an innocent girl, so it might as well be if it's not explicit and like overt.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but the Browning was like, no, this is important.
Yeah.
So the brides initially start at Renfield after he's poisoned by the wine that Dracula won't ever drink, and then Bela Lugosi comes in and leans down, and you don't see the contact, but it is clearly implied that he's the one that starts Renfield on his journey of sort of becoming a ghoul.
So the brides, there were like 3 of them, and then later in London we see some woman in white who I think was Lucy,
yes,
who Dracula has previously taken. Is he just like a polygamist? He just keeps collecting brides?
Yeah. Okay. He needs like call them the brides, but like they're not his wives, like they're his minions.
Yeah.
But yeah. And the whole Lucy thing is great because I don't remember them explicitly saying she died.
Well, they have her on the operating table.
Right. You are right. They do. Yeah.
So then I was confused. I was like, how is she then alive? Well, quotes alive later, but
she's undead. And
how did her body even, it was strange.
So, right. So that's, so you are right. They do have her on the operating table. I forgot about that. So Lucy is the first one that is visited by Dracula, and she's kind of infatuated with him at first. This European guy, and with this, you're like, really? Like this guy? But in the 92 version, she is rightfully infatuated by long curly hair, top hat Gary Oldman.
Who plays her?
Winona Ryder is one of them. She's
Mina.
Lucy. No, she's...
Oh, is she?
Right.
Okay.
Well, Mina in that movie is Lucy in this movie.
Okay.
So she plays Lucy, and I forget who plays Mina.
Okay.
In that movie.
We'll find out.
We'll find out in 3 weeks. Come back. But so Lucy is the woman in white, and that is never dealt with. But yeah, so she is roaming the streets of London at night and basically sucking the blood of children.
Yeah, and the children just are dead.
I'm not sure if all of them die.
It's hard.
Yeah, and then you don't have all the ins and outs. Like Mina in this movie very explicitly says that Dracula makes her drink his blood.
Yeah,
which is how she becomes an actual vampire. Like she's in the process of becoming a vampire. We don't know exactly what he does to Renfield to make him a ghoul. Servant, like a servant.
Yeah, there's like these tears. Well, and I was at first, when they're on the ship, Renfield is clearly awake during the day. I mean, he's in the dark, but he's awake.
He's not a vampire.
And I thought, was like, what are the? Yeah, like there's tears, and then there's like a vampire bites you and sucks out your blood, and you're like dead. Yeah. But then there's a vampire bites you
and doesn't kill you, and then it's So it's right. It's
I need a guidebook.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure that it's much more detailed in the book, and we will probably get. So this movie is like 72 minutes long. It's crazy short, considering that some of the rest of these are going to be in excess of 2 hours. Yeah.
Although I got to say, it did not feel short.
No, it doesn't feel short. The pacing keeps it from feeling short.
Yeah. Though, can we talk about my favorite and what feels the most modern touch? Martin the Orderly.
Martin the Orderly is the superstar of this movie.
Hilarious. I want him to have his own spin-off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's this just like no nonsense, like
world weary.
Yeah. Orderly. Like, and he's in charge of taking care of Renfield. And of course he's doing a horrible job. Yeah. Renfield keeps getting out of his cell and stuff, and he's like, every time he has to round up Renfield, he's like, oh, come on there, old fly eater. Let's go back to your cell. He's like... he's always got the jokes.
Like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins.
A little bit, yeah. He's kind of got that.
Except I imagine that the actor is actually British.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Well, let's find out.
He's just very like, there's the great scene that's just out of nowhere where he tries to shoot the Dracula bat and Van Helsing's like, save your bullets, don't bother. And he's like,
and he's out there on the grass with the maid, they just look at each other. Everyone's crazy except for me and you. And sometimes I have my doubts about you. And the maid is just like, yep.
He slowly backs away from her with his shotgun.
It's very modern feeling. It's really funny.
It is very, it's comic relief to the highest degree, and it's great. And he's in the movie way more than you think he would be.
Yes.
This is way more.
Well, that feels like what they would do in a play too. Like you need a comic relief and well, we have the actor and he's got to be here all night, so might as well use him a lot,
right. But Martin is great. But speaking of all night, something that I revealed to you just before this is that Universal was, even back in the 30s, they were trying to get all their bang for their buck. So they had all these sets and they had this script. So overnight, they actually filmed a Spanish language version with a completely different cast. And I showed you some of the clips of it.
My gosh.
Like Bela Lugosi is and Dwight Fry as Renfield are copping some faces and hamming it up for the camera. But the guy who was playing, and I forget his name, but the guy who was playing Dracula, he has the most expressive face.
Let me just say, the faces they do on telenovelas, they came by them honest. Although, was this Spanish for Spain or Spanish for Mexico?
I don't know.
Or we don't. Okay.
I'm going to assume Mexico, but I don't know. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's like,
I mean, these actors all appeared to be Latino, like Central American Spanish versus Spain's. Well, I guess it's black and white. You can't really tell.
You can't really, I
but to me, they seemed to have features more closely matching.
Until I learn otherwise, I'm going to say Spanish for Mexico because of the faces, because that seems very telenovela-ish.
Oh yeah, the faces. It's just the faces are great. But the thing is, the story that gets told about this movie is that it was lost for a long time, but they found it in like
the Spanish version.
The Spanish version.
Okay,
but they found it in the 90s and put it out and. So they had access to, what would come to be called, they weren't called this at the time, but what would come to be called the dailies. And now everything's digital. There's no such thing as dailies, but they used to like quickly develop a print of the film that was shot that day that wasn't, the master, that they weren't going to use this, but they needed to see it. So it's film. You got to develop it.
Right.
So they would quickly develop a master off the negatives, or develop a daily off the negatives, and you could watch it. And the director could figure out, did we get all the coverage we needed for the day today or what? So the Spanish crew had access to that. So they already knew on any given day, because their shooting schedule matched, okay, well, what did Browning shoot today? Okay, he did this. I don't really think that works. So the director of the Spanish version would do something totally different. We watched a brief little video that was highlighting a few of the things, where he would take a static shot and make it a panning shot.
It's kind of got a head start on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, like he kind of knew, like, how can I make this more dramatic? Like, because he already had the setups and stuff and he knew what he was shooting, but so he could take the extra time to improve the shots. And it's got a little more violence in it. Like Renfield, for one, gets a much better death, because in the movie, in the English version, Renfield just slowly rolls down some stairs and then falls like 3 feet off of the edge and lands behind some boxes.
Unseen. Yeah. Oh, the fall is fantastic.
It's hilarious.
It was great.
Another one of those unintentionally funny things that you just can't help. Like, I totally respect this movie for its place in history, the English version, but it is so hard to go back to. And the Spanish version, apparently not as much.
It's like almost an up close strangling. It's
Renfield gets strangled, and like he gets picked up from behind in the English version, and then gets like throttled about the neck and then tossed off a much higher part of the stairs, and he falls out of frame, but like a much more dramatic fall. There's apparently just generally more violence in it.
I would imagine everything with Mina and Lucy is a little bit more bodice ripping.
Yeah, probably. Oh yeah. So like it's just amazing time capsule of this time when, we think now of like today as being a time when you make things for other languages, because if you ever get to the end of the credits of most movies, there are several additional credits of the voice cast that are dubbed all the actors and stuff. So we think about that. I think about that as a modern thing, but they were straight up shooting full different versions of the movie back then. So that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, what's kind of funny is, so I didn't know any of the other actors in this besides Lugosi.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Spanish language actors were names in Mexico, Spain, wherever. So they need, it was basically a remake for that, not only that language, but that audience. But then I don't recognize any of the English speaking actors. So is that just because I'm not knowledgeable about 30s film stars, or were they not really well known? I don't know.
Right. I think a lot of the people were, they were typecast, so to speak, into like horror type movies and lower, tier stuff. Like, so I imagine if you watch, I know if you watch more of the Universal movies, you see more of these actors. They reoccur in Frankenstein and Mummy and Wolfman and stuff. Not only like, Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff all reoccur, but like a bunch of the bit players reoccur. This is back in the day of like contract actors.
Right.
So these people were probably in every Universal movie, like even, small parts. They were probably in like every other Universal movie that came out in one way or another, because they were just contract actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the guy who played Van Helsing was in a lot of stuff. A lot of silent movies and stuff, I believe. And yeah, for the rest of them, I don't know. I mean, Martin, the orderly, I hope he had his own one-man show or something.
I hope so.
That actor is Charlie something. I forget his name.
He's hilarious.
Yeah. So it is. I don't know. I don't know when though. Like, when do you have to? How far back could you go with me or you, where we would stop recognizing like character actors, like where, like
not very far if you're
like
me.
right. So like if you got back into the 70s, our parents would probably be like, oh yeah, I know that guy. He's in everything in the 60s and 70s, in the same way that we're like, J.K. Simmons is in everything in the, so yeah, like I wonder is it just so far away? Like these may have been relatively famous actors for the time, but we have no way of knowing. And I'm honestly not in the habit of watching a lot of movies from the 30s and 40s. So yeah, I wouldn't even know. Like I said, I've seen maybe half a dozen movies before 1950. Maybe including Wizard of Oz being one of them.
Yeah, I've probably seen a few more, but not that many.
Yeah, and I mean, I say half a dozen, but like I'm not counting the Universal monster movies when I say that, because I've seen most all of them, including like Phantom of the Opera and even the stuff that wasn't like directly in their chain of monster movies. Yeah. So Dracula, it's apparently, semi-accurate to the book. Lots of little changes. I am interested in seeing how things progress as we go through the Dracula Spooktacular. If we can start to draw some contrasts between the different ones and how they handle things. But, this movie, again, like, can I recommend this movie? Like, yes, for its historic value, but also like you're gonna laugh at things that you're not supposed to.
If you're looking to be actually scared, this ain't it.
No, and again, like that is just a time and place thing. Yeah. Like so much of this movie, like the pacing of this movie, the lack of musical score in this movie, like
the lack of close-ups or jump scares.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like A B stuff when people are talking. It's just we framed all three people in this scene and they're just going to talk to each other. Yeah. And sometimes we're going to pan, and one of the people that's talking is going to be panned off screen,
out of frame. Yeah,
there's a particular time where Jonathan Van Helsing and Dr. Seward are talking about Mina and how best to protect her. And Seward is like, well, she's my daughter and I think I know what's best for her or whatever. And they just pan him off the screen while he's mid-sentence to get the shot a little bit tighter on Jonathan and Van Helsing.
Well,
I'm like, because I was like, I thought like, who's talking right now?
Is that because of aspect ratio? Because now I can't remember. It wasn't Letterboxd, was it?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know what.
I believe it was 3. It was 3x4.
I don't know what screen dimensions were in the 30s.
I believe it would have been widescreen, like.
Oh, that's right, because you wouldn't need to letterbox an RTV. Okay, never mind.
Well, right, but I also don't think this. We just watched this, and I can't remember if this was taking up the whole screen or if it was cropped, because I know like. One of the first times that they did a big preservation project on these was for the VHS release, which wouldn't have been widescreen.
Right.
But like I said, I don't know what version of this. Well, like I picked the HD version.
Yeah.
That may be part of it, but still, even if it's not, like they still were panning him off. They were like recentering the scene to focus on two other characters.
Anyway,
and again, like it's because they don't know a lot of this stuff yet.
Yeah.
Like they've only been shooting silent movies for, the 10 years before this or whatever. And
it's developing art.
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember what year it came out, but watching this is making me appreciate It Happened One Night, which is the oldest other movie that I remember seeing. I want to say it's mid 30s.
Yeah.
So after this, but not too much. That I recall as being much snappier.
Possibly. Yeah.
And I watched it 15 years ago and didn't come away feeling like, oh my God, it's so slow.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
So it makes me appreciate that much more in retrospect.
Yeah. And it does kind of suck because, there's all these movies that are legitimately good, but they come with baggage. And you have to navigate that stuff beforehand. Like it's kind of interesting because it's almost like it's the equivalent of, oh, the show is really good by season 3. Like, are you telling me I got to watch 24 episodes of this before it even gets good?
Well,
it's basically like telling someone this is good asterisk. Like,
I don't know.
But,
I think it's similar to, to if you're studying history and you are really interested in World War II, okay, but you have to start in 1912 to understand what led up to World War I and then the 20s and everything set the stage for it. And like maybe your focus is this, but you need the background. So
Sure.
So this is part of the mythos of Dracula.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about just like as a movie, not like as a piece of history. I'm talking about as a movie. Like if you want to watch it as a piece of history, yeah, like you got to like not in the context of film, like, but in the context of movie history, stuff like The Maltese Falcon and like, there are movies like Casablanca that are going to be like boring to a lot of people because of the pacing. These movies that are like these touchstones of film, and we watch them now with modern sensibilities and are just like, this is boring, or this looks like garbage the way this is shot.
I don't know. Well, we've talked about this before though. I've seen the original Psycho. I think it was in high school.
Yeah.
And then I watched the remake 10 years later. And it was only when it was in color with modern actors that I realized, oh my gosh, this is really slow. It did not seem slow to me in the original. So I think there are some movies where the pacing fits with everything else about it. And so it doesn't seem all that slow. Now that's a personal... Some people are going to notice it. Some people aren't, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
but
maybe. Although I would I would argue that Psycho is not slow. It's tense, and that's a big difference. And what you're perceiving from the colorized Vince Vaughn version is that it's bad acting. But
Possibly.
That's neither here nor there.
Possibly.
We'll save that for our Psycho episode. But yeah, it's and this black and white did not save this movie.
True.
Like I wasn't able to forgive it its trespasses just because it was black and white. But yeah, so be prepared for this movie not to land like it would have landed in 1931 if you were living back then. It is worth watching, especially at like 70, like a lean 70 minutes, even though it'll feel like more than 70 minutes.
Really
the reality is it will only take 70 minutes.
Yes.
But
I asked for a bathroom break and I didn't really need it. I just was like, I gotta get out of this seat.
15 minutes left.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's it's a piece of history. Watch it for that reason. And like do something like we're doing. Watch a bunch of Dracula movies. Watch a bunch of Frankenstein movies. Like educate yourself, because I'm thinking like, I'm thinking of these things like I want to show my kid Young Frankenstein because it's such a hilarious movie, but I got to show him Frankenstein.
I don't know. I've never seen Frankenstein.
But
I think you
then you don't truly have the capacity to appreciate Young Frankenstein.
Listen,
and I want to give him that.
I watched Spaceballs before I had seen any of the Star Wars, and I still thought it was funny.
I know. And you will still, and someone who hasn't seen Frankenstein will also think that Young Frankenstein is funny. Just like you were just saying, you were watching this movie and going, this feels like a parody because you've seen all the parodies of it.
Yeah.
But the parodies would have been even funnier if you knew what they were directly referencing when you saw the parody.
Regarding our kids specifically, I think we'll have an easier time getting him to watch Young Frankenstein than the original Frankenstein.
I don't know.
Just saying.
We'll see. So
we'll do that next year.
Dracula, 1931.
Yep.
I don't think there's a lot more to be said about it. I'm sure that there's more to be said about it, but not by us.
Well, if there's any more to be said, we hope that our listeners will tell us. Folks, we would love to know what you think. How many times did you laugh when you weren't really supposed to? Who's your favorite character and why is it Martin the Orderly? Let us know. You can drop us a line via Facebook, via Twitter, or on email. Our handle is the same for all three. It's YSMY Podcast, YSMY for you, show me yours. Email is at gmail.com or message us on Twitter and Facebook. And on Twitter and Facebook, we put up links to our new episodes, which we have traditionally every 2 weeks, every other Wednesday. But we have them every week in October. So, special. More, double your pleasure, double your podcast fun, 4 episodes in October. You can get links to new episodes there, or you can find us on most of your major podcast providers, specifically Apple Podcasts. While you're at those podcast providers, we would love it if you would rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you subscribe, that puts the episodes right in your queue. And if you rate and review, it helps other people learn about us. Or, you can just tell your friends. Sharing is caring. Say they did this great movie that you want to see, and introduce them to us and the movie. Like I said, every week in October, we are talking about another Dracula movie. And next week, what are we talking about, Dave?
The Hammer classic, the Hammer Films classic, Horror of Dracula with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. It is a return to Dracula. 1958, Dracula horror movies had kind of fallen out, and Hammer Films, I believe a British production house, decided to bring them back. And much in the same way that Dracula started a franchise for Universal, Horror of Dracula started a franchise of monster-related movies for Hammer Films.
Okay.
And we are going to watch it.
You say Hammer, and I think MC Hammer every time.
MC Hammer Films.
Too legit. He was too legit to quit.
He was. Apparently.
Dracula is the undead because he's too legit to quit life.
Except for he's dead.
That's what I'm saying. He's undead. No?
Okay, workshop it. Bring it back.
Okay. Yeah. Next week I'll have a better take on that. All right. We'll see you next time with the other Dracula movie. And in the meantime, this has been... They're just all Dracula to me. I'm sorry. You told me...
They're not all named Dracula.
But they're all
Horror
about
of Dracula.
Thank you. You said it like 10 seconds before and I forgot. So next time we'll do Horror of Dracula. In the meantime, this has been You Show Me Yours. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. Did you hear about kale?
No. I mean...
Like, no,
that it was a thing.
Right. But do you know how that came about?
The Kale Manufacturers Association?
No, but yes.
Manufacturers? What did I? Yeah, okay.
Yes, but also no.
Okay.
An ad exec who just really liked kale made up an advocacy organization for kale and then pretended that they were her client and just like went around and got celebrities to say they liked kale. Like she just liked kale. Like at the time that she started that, the number one buyer of kale in America was Pizza Hut because they used it as decoration on their salad bar. And she liked it. And she shifted the entire kale industry from like forgotten about just like visual aesthetic vegetable into like kale smoothies and all that. Like she just decided that she liked kale and other people should too. So she took like the same track as like that Milk had taken, 20 years before, and was just like, we're going to get the right people to pose with bowls of kale and say that it's good. And I am convinced that I can get people to love kale. And she did.
That is truly evil genius.
It's great.
Again, like if she could just use her powers for good.
Yeah. Which she would say she did.
Promoting kale is not evil, but although
it could be considered